I teach culinary studies. And yeah, that's all about me for now.
Okay, thank you. Sine?
Hi everyone, I'm Sine Baduza and I'm currently a chef de partie at one of the fine dining restaurants in Cape Town. So I've had quite a long journey with food, having gone to culinary school or graduated from culinary school rather in 2011. Yes, so I'm just excited just to have a discussion with you guys today about what the future holds for us all.
Great. Kabelo?
Hi everyone. Well, my name is Kabelo Luhle Dalla, and I'm a student at CPUT, and I'm doing my third year, and at the moment I'm studying hospitality management in professional cookery. Yes, that will be.
Thank you. And Bongo?
Hi, my name is Bongo Xabela. I'm a chef at Game Lodge at the Nambiti Reserve, head chef position, and I'm glad that we have an outlet to voice our opinions about this matter. I've been cooking since 2000. I graduated 2007, and I've been doing this ever since. Really enjoyed it. I've seen, I've traveled, been exposed to a lot, and I've learned a lot, and I've imparted what I've learned to my fellow chefs. I really enjoy this journey, and I hope to continue this journey during and after this pandemic.
Thank you, Bongo. And so part of what we will be discussing is this journey forward and the uncertainty, but also the potential possibilities that lie ahead living under the pandemic. So let me just welcome a few other people who have joined us. To those of you who are joining, you know, today we're looking at the perspective of graduate students and young chefs. And they're asking the question, what future does the kitchen hold for me? And I think maybe a good starting point for us before we get into how this pandemic has changed our lives would be to ask the question, what inspired you to start this journey in food and to become a professional chef? I think, Kabelo, since you are the one that is still studying, could we perhaps start with you and ask you what inspired you to become a chef?
Well, ma'am, I can say that what inspired me to be a chef is that since I was young, like I've always known that stereotype that men, like for instance in black cultures, men don't cook, and the woman does the cooking most of the time. So, and in my household where I grew up, it's always the matter of that. It's not like that. My father was the one that always used to do the cooking and not my mother. So that's what basically inspired me, because I saw him cooking all the time. It was actually something that very interested me at a very young age. I can say around about 10, when I was 10 years old. So that inspired me, because many people were saying that men don't cook and this and that. But actually at home, I saw someone that I look up to, which is my father. He actually could do something that was cooking for us every day. And so, yeah, that's basically that ignited that spark in me of wanting to be a chef.
And Kabelo, on this note, when you expressed this to your family, that this is the line of work you would like to do and this is what you would like to study, what was the response from them?
Well, ma'am, I'm like very lucky in that sense, because with my parents are very supportive towards me and in anything that I do. So when I told them that I actually wanted to be a chef, like they didn't like worry too much that I wanted to be a chef, because they just told me that whatever I wanted to be, they will support me in that route, and we will see from there going towards the future. If I fail in that way, then I will fail and I will learn from my lessons and I will carry on and be someone strong from that.
Well, what wonderful support to have at a formative age. So let us listen to your lecturer, Funi. Can you tell us what inspired you to go into cookery, Funi?
Oh, very long story. What happened actually is more or less like Cabelo's, where my grandfather was a chef. in a small hotel in Luitrichat, where I come from. And then every time when he comes back home, you know what he will do? Come back sometimes late. I won't eat. I will wait for him to come back. Reason being, he will recook the food. And the food will taste much better now. Where I was no longer a favorite of my gran because she's like, okay, because you won't eat my food. And when your grandfather comes back, he will recook the food and it tastes much better. And then from there, I think before matric, actually I was the first guy to do home economics. I don't know, these days they call it hospitality or consumer studies, where I was doing science, mathematics, but now you have to choose between home economics, which was for girls, and then agricultural sciences was for boys. And then now I went to the principal and then say, you know, this is what I want to do. He said, no, it cannot happen. Bring your parents along. And I went and spoke to my dad. He's like, okay, if that's what you want to do, we'll go with you. Talk to the principal. He said, okay, if that's what you want, it's fine. Allow him to do so. But now as the only guy there, where I feel a little bit ashamed, I approached two more guys whom to come, and then they joined, and then we're three. And then metric-wise, did very well. I think, I don't know, in those days, B, if you have B in home economics, I don't know if these days it's going to be like distinction maybe, yeah. And then from there, a little bit confused because all my friends now were going to the Medical University of South Africa, Medunsa then, where you're getting a bursary from the government. Where, okay, the government gives you a bursary, you can now study medicine. Around September, same year, I came back home, I said, I need to drop out. And then they're like, why do you want to drop out? I gave the reasons to my parents, but now you owe the government money. And then, okay, it's fine. I dropped out, went and helped my granny at the crash, where she was running a crash. And then after the following year, that's where I started, went to Pretoria. This next door, it was called, it's TUT now. It was called TNG, Tinkham of Northern Gauteng. And I did my first and second year in there in food service management, went to the Vaal University of Technology where I did my bachelor's degree there in education, bachelor's degree in food service management, went on and did my master's degree in food service management where it was more into community. And then, yeah, I end up now as a lecturer at the CPUT.
Hey, Lufundo, can you just give us a date so we can also place you when you first started officially with the food studies? Which year was that?
It was in 1999.
Okay, 1999. Right. And Sine, would you like to weigh in?
I've also had quite the journey with food. For me, it started back when I was maybe 12 years old. So I grew up in East London, and both my parents ended up having to work in Episho, which is an hour's drive away. So that's how myself and my siblings had the responsibility of making dinners at home. So it was this lovely experience of us bonding and cooking together and coming up with our own little system of like who was going to cook when and wash dishes and share that responsibility. But that's sort of my earliest memories of food. And it was this wonderful sort of creative outlet where every single time you had to come up with the next dish, and we were always trying to kind of outdo each other as far as that was concerned. And then when I left high school, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to study, but I knew I was good with numbers at school. So that resulted in me finding enrolling at UCT and studying towards eventually a BCom in accounting. But during that time, my siblings, and again, we decided to start up a small little catering enterprise, which mainly serviced our family friends, where we did sort of a family reunion at one point. We catered my younger sister's 13th birthday party that was, fully kitted out. We hired tables and chairs and put together this exciting event for her. and her friends. And around that time, that's when BBC Food was, you know, a big thing for me in my world. And I remember being glued to the screen and watching your Jamie Olivers and Nigella every single week. That's what I did on my spare time coming back from university. And for me, I personally loved to bake around that time. And so it was always, it was an outlet for me. And it started just with that love for baking and spending time in the kitchen and playing around with some of the dishes that I'd see on the Food Network. So towards the end of my degree program, I sort of realized I was on the path of becoming a CA, and they introduced auditing, and I realized that this is not really what I want to do. So I ended up taking a gap year, and I was lucky enough that my parents afforded me the opportunity to you know, go abroad. I stumbled across the world of super yachting. So off to Florida, I was based in Fort Lauderdale. Off to Florida I went, and I wanted to sort of explore this, you know, newfound passion of mine. And I then was a cook and stewardess aboard privately owned yachts, and explored that. And I did that based in Florida, and I was afforded the opportunity to cook and travel at the same time for a year. And it was during, at some point when I was in yachting, struggling to find positions as, you know, being the main sort of chef or for sort of chef positions on some of the boats, because a lot of them were looking for culinary trained chefs. That's one of the things that I'd see in the adverts all the time. So in the struggle that I found in finding some employment at some point, because I wasn't culinary trained. And this one day, I remember in particular, there was the Arts Institute in Florida, in Fort Lauderdale. And I remember I was on my way walking to the beach, and I found that students were there having their lecture. And I remember standing outside and just staring and looking at these students in class. And that's where the seed was planted to actually go into culinary school and really just explore this passion further. And again, my parents helped me at the time. Lucky enough, I wasn't ready to come home. I wanted to just stay in America. And they afforded me the opportunity to go to culinary school there. So I found the school in San Francisco, and I enrolled in Le Cordon Bleu, the California Culinary Academy. And I took part in their 21-month program. And, you know, that was just the beginning of the beautiful adventure that I've had with food.
Thank you so much for sharing that. For those of you who have just joined us, you know, we are discussing the point of view of graduate students and young chefs. When we say young chefs, of course, doesn't by any means define their seniority in the kitchen, but this is how they have defined themselves. And they're asking the question, what future does the kitchen hold for me? So thank you so much to all of you who have joined us since we started. I'm going to ask you to please put your microphone on mute if you are not a panelist. And then moving on to the last person on our panel today, Bongo. Can you please share for us some of your inspiration that got you kickstarted into joining the culinary world?
Well, my biggest inspiration in this was my mother. Watching my mother cook. She used to have a catering company at the time. She used to cook at weddings, at traditional events, and just at home. So watching her cook and how she manipulates spices and tastes and flavors, and I used to spend my time just watching her do this. So I remember during my matric year, she came with a pamphlet for a chef school. Like, would you like to travel? Because I always see you watching Jamie Oliver on Sundays on SABC3, and you're really into this. And at the time, I used to help my mother cook, and I'd also find my little inspiration, go through her cookbooks, and Mom taught us all those recipes on True Love magazines and all of that. She used to have a lot of magazines and cookbooks, and and I'd just page and I'd look, okay, this is how you do this is how you do that, and it stuck. It wasn't something that I was like, okay, this is what, it was always there. It was always there in the back. My mom brought this pamphlet, hey, would you like to study this? It's like, hey, I would like to, but parents at the time couldn't afford it. So I put that dream on the back burner, and I went to go study civil engineering. And I did a year of that, and I realized I'm not happy with this. I'm not inspired. I don't want to do this. This is not, maybe it's the institution, maybe it's me. It's not a fit. It's not fitting. I made up my mind. I remember going back to that pamphlet and calling up the number and they did interviews before you went into the school. So I went for an interview, they assessed me, said, okay, you should come in next year. This is 2006 at the time. So 2007, January, I enrolled. And I just had that feeling that this is it. This is what I want to do. And at the time, the fees were really pricey. So I used to work at the internet cafe, and I was afforded the opportunity to be a private chef while I'm studying at school, and I would implement what I studied at school at the home I was cooking for. So that's where I got the flow of how to work in the kitchen, and then that opened an opportunity to work at one of the best restaurants in East London at the time, which was called Smoky Swallows. And I went in there, asked the owner, can I work here? And told him I'm a student, and like, okay, show us what you got. I can't remember what I cooked for him, and he's like, okay, fine. You can start here, but you're not going to start on a good salary, because you're not qualified, you're not a chef yet. So I had 2 sources of income and still studying, so I really, if I had to do that now, I don't know how I would do it, but just the passion pushed me through. When I graduated, I got my diploma, and from there, I got to work at a hotel. That's when I got to understand a big kitchen. I got to learn how to delegate and lead and take responsibility and work with people that not exposed to, who have not studied what you need them. And I started as a commie chef, and I worked my way up. And this was in 2010. I got the opportunity to go to the US, of which I worked there for 7 years, and I came back 6 to 7 years, and I came back. And since I've been back, I've worked in Mpumalanga, I've worked Cape Town, I've worked Johannesburg, now KwaZulu-Natal. So it's been a great journey.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. These stories are what inspires people to do what they're currently doing. Always fascinate me. So I'm going to invite those of you who are chefs or culinary students who are listening to join us in the chat box, and maybe also just add a little there about what inspired you to do what you are doing. And of course, as we go on chatting about the concerns and the fears, please feel welcome to add your input there as well, or also direct questions to some of our participants. So now moving on, everything has taken a swift turn since the beginning of the year. And globally, the industry, hospitality and restaurant, is under a severe crisis. And nobody knows what is going to happen next, what form it will take, if we're ever going to go back to the way we knew it to be, the way everyone who's spoken to us today has studied for. They have studied and worked towards a certain model that existed until the beginning of the year. So we find ourselves in a very different space now. I would like to invite our panelists to very briefly speak to us about some of the challenges, physical and mental, of studying or working right now. Would you weigh in, please? Funi?
Oh, sorry, I'm muted. I was coughing. Sorry about that.
Okay. So what have been challenges that you have seen and experienced right now?
At the moment, I think Kabelo will be with me at this moment because they're supposed to be done. Actually, they were supposed to be going to industry. Now they cannot go to the industry because now we did not finish the syllabus. They have not done all this. And then we try now to say, okay, the online learning that we can do is still not really working for us. That's the frustration that I'm having at the moment. Also now, they need to come back to school to finish the practicals and go for industry to work, graduate next year. At this moment, that's what I'm saying. I think it's a very, very confusing and frustrating moment that we are facing as a lecturer. Yeah.
Can we just very briefly touch on the online learning? Now, I know this would fit the bill better if we spoke about we spoke education segment, but I listened yesterday to a panel that was speaking about, it was a youth-driven panel, and they did cover the idea of finishing school and the pitfalls of online learning, particularly because of this. Can you maybe address that for us in terms of your access to the internet?
What the university did, they come up with a zero-rated data to say, okay, guys, this is what we got. We're going to support you and give you the data so that you can continue with your learning program. But still, I hardly get, out of 30 students, I hardly get 5 per day, which I think is still a challenge. Some complain about the, what called the data, not data, the signal where they are. Some cannot be able to access through the phone. They need a laptop or this and that. Yeah, those are the challenges that we are facing.
Okay, so we do have some technology. I suppose in addition to the fact that when one gets absorbed into the home environment, that changes the learning environment. Perhaps students are also required to participate in all those home activities. So, Sine, could you also tell us a little bit about the challenges that have been faced in your experience?
So for me, what I didn't mention earlier, so I took a bit of a time out from cooking, and I was working in an office for a few years as an accountant, the fallback plan. But obviously that I had that burning passion within me that I couldn't ignore anymore. And so in November last year, I decided to go back into the kitchen. So that, from a physical standpoint, my one frustration was, because I had worked so hard over the past few months, getting myself back into action, getting myself back into kitchen shape, which was a mental and physical struggle in of its own. That was the first thing. My first frustration now is like, okay, now I'm back at home and I cannot cook in that space. And I think as restaurant chefs, we can tell you that cooking at home and cooking in a professional kitchen is not the same thing. As much as we can enjoy to do both, it's a completely different mindset that you need to have to be in a restaurant. You're talking about the hours that you're putting in, the passion that you're putting in, you're working with a team of chefs, and all of that in a flash because of COVID and lockdown restrictions was gone, and we didn't have access to that. So some of it was maintaining the relationships that I have with some of the chefs in the kitchen, checking in with each other and making sure that we are all keeping safe and healthy and well. And some of it was sharing recipes with some of the chefs that I know. I think a lot of us saw an upsurge in activity on social media. I think it was great to see that all of a sudden, where our community in which we'd talk about food was maybe this small, now everyone and anyone that we know, home cooks and the like, were now all of a sudden talking about food, which was such an amazing thing to see. It felt that we could keep this conversation going, and all of a sudden, ex-colleagues and friends that I hadn't spoken to in a long time, we were all engaging in this discussion and sharing recipes and cooking and learning together. I think it was also quite a cool space as well to be able to reconnect with some of my friends in the industry. I mean, Amanda being one of them. So we also used this as a time to start brainstorming about some ideas about things that we could do with our time and things that we'd been cooking and dishes that we wanted to come up with together. So we utilized that time for that. There's also a very good friend of mine and a Silver student that came into the kitchen. She had quite a great story where she wanted to learn how to make sourdough, for instance. She'd never made it before. So she was online, discovered Richard Bertinet, got into one of his recipes, learned how to make sourdough, and then ended up eventually even selling sourdough to people within her community. So that was an example of how, you know, an individual had taken what had happened during COVID and being in lockdown and had used it to kind of still want to learn and learn more about food, and actually sharing that learning with people within her community. I think it's also been really exciting to see some of the chefs in our community and some of the restaurant chefs that we would ordinarily not see online, all of a sudden now jumping online and also showing us how they were cooking at home and sharing some of their recipes that they used in their restaurants with the community at large. That was really an amazing opportunity that we may not have been afforded had lockdown not happened, to actually learn from some of the greats in the industry. Yeah, so it has been a trying time, but there's also been some really positive things that have happened within our community.
Well, that's, looking at the positive side is, I suppose we're going to find some of the solutions going forward in these positive elements. Bongo, I just wanted to touch very briefly on some of the mental struggles that this time may have brought up. Could you tell us a little bit?
Well, because where I work right now is a very isolated place. You're working at a game lodge, you know, it's driven on camaraderie and a fellowship and
Yes.
family day. So people being detached from that, you know, I can see it, and people are complaining they miss that daily interaction, just being removed from a community that you're part of, especially a person like me who's just started there, just getting the momentum of the guys. Hey guys, this is the direction I'm heading to. With me gaining their respect, gaining their trust, and all of a sudden having that cut, you know, you have to start all over again. That's frustrating. Having the uncertainty of not knowing where you're going to get your next paycheck, you know, also very stressful. It's there was this whole limbo with the UIF and how who's going to get paid, or are we really going to get paid? When is the lockdown going to end? You know, all uncertainty. Really scary, you know, it's really, really scary, and no one communicating, because the owners of the lodge don't know what's going on. The heads of tourism don't really know what's going on, you know, they can only give us so far to work with, you know? So yeah. I can't blame, I can't really point fingers and say, hey, what about me? No one knows. We are on the unprecedented times. I don't really blame anyone, but coming back to the mental side, I had to communicate more with my team and people that I work with. Hey guys, how are you guys? Just doing those daily checkups. Hey guys, how you doing? You guys okay? You know, sharing jokes, having that kind of the camaraderie in that kitchen, having it every day, even if it's sharing funny videos, just having that positivity, that camaraderie, just trying to maintain that, just to get them by, you know. And I have a chef that was struggling with alcohol addiction, and I could say in 2 months of me working with him, we were getting somewhere. You know, we were just limits. I wasn't like really strict. Hey, stop what you're doing now. It was, you have a problem, let's address it, and then it's really crushing now. He's going back to that because it's a coping mechanism. Whereas there it was if he had a problem, it'd come to me. We had that relationship, we had that, oh, hey, such and such is happening at home. This is why I'm drinking, or this is why I'm doing this. So that interaction is, it's devastating.
The support system. So the issues that we are facing here, I know, are multiple, and certainly we won't be able to address them with any depth during the course of this conversation. And I think us looking at it from a labor aspect is something that we at SAPOC need to consider exploring as well, having this conversation about what exactly went down with the UIF, what exactly went down with solidarity funds and various relief funds that were made available, exactly how did we foreign nationals who are also, you know, quite a large component of the service industry, and other things, because the money and the financial worries definitely impact the mental state and the support system that that is created in that. And so, Kabelo, from the perspective of a student who is not, in all likelihood, not going to graduate in 2020, can you please share some of the challenges of this time?
Well, the challenges that I have at the moment and some of the friends that I have is just basically the support structure that we used to have with our lecturers. Because, for instance, like being at school, doing work, being at, especially for me, like studying at Granger Bay specifically, and not at CPUT, Granger Bay specifically, is that we had more of a support structure from our lecturers and from other students as well, where we could help one another with schoolwork and all of that. But now, since that is all taken away and you have to try and do this work alone at home and try to get all that information from online, it's kind of difficult because now, for instance, first thing, just waking up in the morning and having to have an online class is, is not fun at all. So now you'd rather just go back to sleep and not worry about that online because it's online and you'll just find the work from someone else. But now that's just like the work is piling up so much now because now you have assignments to do, you have formatives to do. There's some, like for instance, we didn't write exams, and now that's like a lot of things that we're thinking about. When are we going to do all of this stuff? Because now it's very difficult for us because, for instance, we told ourselves like we had plans going into this year of we're going to be graduating at this time, and at this time we were supposed to be done actually with all our studies. But since the pandemic has happened, we don't know now when our graduation will happen. We don't know when we will be writing the next exam. We don't know, for instance, even with the in-service that we're supposed to do, that experience that we're supposed to get from that is all taken away now.
Yeah, there are so many uncertainties that make the situation extremely complex to navigate. And, you know, we're sometimes even afraid to ask the question, will chefs as we know them continue to be the way, you know, well, I think we certainly can't expect them just to be placed in restaurants ready to receive multiple numbers as we did before. I'm also very curious, Kabelo, amongst your fellow classmates and students, what are some of the questions that you are discussing? What are some of the things that you're saying about not being able to graduate?
So, ma'am, like most of my friends on the not graduating part is that we are trying to graduate. We don't want that where we're not going to be graduating.
Okay.
So now, for instance, like we've like some of us are trying to put pressure maybe on our lecturers as well on maybe giving us something that will be able, like doing something that will be able to making us graduate next year, because with our course we don't graduate the same year, we graduate the year after that. So I would be graduating in April next year if I'm correct. So now the problem is, for instance, with our in-service. Now, since we're not doing in-service anymore, we might be getting an assignment in the place of an in-service.
Right.
So the big thing and the big question on everybody's head is that, does it count the same as the experience that you would have gotten if you did, and was this a practical on that? Because now, ma'am, how can I say this? The experience that we've gotten that is not the same. because now instead of having 1 year's experience with the course that we're doing in O, now we only have 6 months of experience.
I hear you, because I can imagine that there must be alternatives that you're looking for to take the place of these things that would have allowed you to graduate. For those of you joining us, thank you and welcome. Please put your microphones on mute. As you know, we're discussing what the future of the kitchens hold for graduate students and young chefs. And I really would like to invite you to participate in the chat box if you have any questions, if you have any concerns. Are you a chef? If you are a chef, what will you do in terms of young graduates, considering the very precarious situation we find ourselves in? Would you be willing to let them into your kitchens? I suppose the idea of social distancing puts a lot of pressure on that as well. So please get in there and let us know what you're thinking as well. What are your concerns? So, you know, one of the things that you mentioned, Sine, was looking back. You said that if you had to go back to culinary school, you would perhaps speak to yourself and give yourself some words of wisdom. I know we have about less than 20 minutes left to unpack quite a bit of things, but I thought perhaps you could take a few of those minutes, Sine, to tell us, what would you tell yourself as a younger graduate student?
Okay, so for me, coming out of culinary school, I think there were two questions that I was asked. And the first was, when are you going to open up your first restaurant, your own restaurant? And the second was, what is your specialty? And I was chatting a little bit by email, and for me, I think I really struggled with those two questions for the longest time. And I think now, after spending some time in and outside of the industry and with my own sort of running my own events, I would answer these questions by just outlining the first thing. I think we place a large focus when we're in culinary school in terms of the curriculum on working in the restaurant field, which is not particularly the be-all and end-all of the food and beverage industry. And I think it's some of the things that I've come to discover after having left culinary school. I mean, you have, there's food styling, food stylists, food writers, there are recipe developers, and there's so many things that you can do within the industry. That does not necessarily mean actually having to work in the industry and in an actual restaurant setting. And I think it's important for us to take some time out and actually investigate in what those things may be and what those things look like, especially for someone like you, Kabelo, now that you have this time just to actually look around and see the very, very many avenues that you can explore within this wonderful food and beverage industry. And I think particularly for me that there was a turning point in my career where I was working at a fine dining industry for a year and found myself in a space where particularly I had to look into my own sort of mental health and mental well-being, and working in the restaurant wasn't necessarily the space for me to do that at that time. And I think looking back, I wish I would have taken the time to actually look at different things that I could have done within the space, whether it had been private chefing, for instance, or starting up a venture of my own, looking into coming up with a product of your own. There's so many things that you can do and so many things that we're seeing young chefs doing right now. For example, there's the Lazy Makoti is a prize example of a woman that discovered her passion for food, and she, you know, put together a cookbook of recipes from of dishes that were being cooked in her home environment, and she's out there sharing and creating a brand of her own and connecting with young cooks from home. So there are, and my friend Amanda Manyashi, for instance, is a food stylist, spent some time working in Woolworths and is now developing that skill of her own, and in her own right as a private chef. and is also, you know, blogging and investigating about food. Tapiwa of Tapi Tapi is a fan favorite of mine. Again, someone else who has a love and passion for food and indigenous ingredients and is using ice cream as a vessel to teach us about our own indigenous products and produce that we have here in Africa. So there's so much that we can do within the food space. And I think it's important for us to also just investigate those things and find out what they are. Not to say that being a restaurant chef isn't amazing. I mean, I love what I do on a daily basis, and I really am passionate about working in a professional kitchen, and I love that space, but I wish I would have been afforded someone to actually, the opportunity of having someone to actually let me know or investigate on my own. There were so many other opportunities available to me. The second question that I spoke of was, what is your specialty? And I think it's important for us to remember that when we go to culinary school, we learn the fundamentals predominantly out there in French, traditional French cooking techniques. And what this means is that now you have the tools and the skills to be able to do with it whatever it is that you want. So we venture out into the food industry and we work in different food spaces and in different restaurants, learning about the foods and the techniques that are unique to the different restaurant spaces that we work in. And for me, it was about a mindfulness of the fact that within that space, I am learning about the cuisine of that particular chef. And I'm here to get skills and gain knowledge in this particular chef's style of cuisine. But it's also important to be mindful of what are the things that I'm passionate about within the food space. I mean, there's Italian food, Asian food cuisine. Within our own continent, there's so many different types of cuisines as well. I mean, from Ethiopian food, from in Nigeria, within here in our own home, in our own backyard, there are so many different styles of cooking and techniques that have been passed on from generation to generation, which deserve to be explored, which also deserve a space as well to be heard. So I think it was important for me to then ask myself, what is it that I like to cook? What is it that speaks to me? And then spend the time and actually investigate in whatever style of cooking speaks to me, because you have to be mindful of the fact that one day you will come out and step out on your own, and you need to be able to be representative of whatever is unique to you, whatever your voice is. Ishay, I mentioned there was a chef that I worked with that I found very inspiring, that used to take the time out. He would go and buy a lot of cookbooks, which I think is something we all should be doing, and just exploring different cooking styles. And he had this notebook where he would write down different combinations of tastes and flavors, just trying to just build and nurture his own voice within cooking. So when you find a unique ingredient, when you find a dish that you're passionate about, take it home, play around in your kitchen with the little that you do have, and explore with it and find what it is that speaks to you, and input yourself through the things that you cook within your own space. I think it's very important to actually develop that voice that is unique to you, so that one day when you stand up on your stage within your platform, whatever that platform may be, you're able to say, this is who I am and this is what my voice is within the culinary space.
Thank you so much for that, Sine. I think it's a lot for culinary students and those who are on the journey to take into account and to ponder and to use. Fune, on that note, I would just, as somebody who is a lecturer, a chef, and who works on social media platforms as well as an influencer, what are you saying to the students in terms of where they can take this knowledge? Is it part of the curriculum that you speak about various options and opportunities beyond the kitchen, or is that something that you perhaps address in your personal capacity with them?
What we normally do, like at CPT, remember we've got a curriculum that is already been packed, done. But most of them, like if you look into the group that we have, the Kabelo's group, most of them, they want to become chefs. We do have the one that want to focus into food and beverage. And then we do have the front of house. We do have the back of the house. Also, we do have the housekeeping or accommodation management, where to say to them, if you study accommodation management, what are they thinking? They're going to become housekeeper, they're going to become work in a hotel, where normally what we normally do, sometimes we get someone like the Caitlin, I don't know if you remember, you know Caitlin, where last year she came and just do like a 1 week, which was doing food styling, food photography with the students, talk about blogging, because I encourage each and every one of them to say, please have your Instagram account, because these days when you go for an interview as a chef, they will Google that and just see what you do. And then if you put everything on your Instagram, it's there. Interview's already done because they know what you're capable of. This is what you can do.
Post the food, not just the selfies. Is that what you're saying?
They know, they put the food, everything in there, not put your selfies, because your selfie is not going to get a job. You're building a profile in here where you're saying, okay, this is my profile. That's what we're trying to do. Yeah.
Okay.
And then also maybe, sorry?
No, continue.
No, I was just also saying the other opportunity, like Sine she mentioned so many opportunities that this student can do, which is very, very true for me to say, okay, I think I must invite you to one of my class after COVID, so that come and talk to the students. Let's hear them ask questions, because there are things like blogging. There are things where you can just become a food writer, where you can become like an influencer for another company. There's so many opportunities nowadays. If people are rich, they've got their own private chef who stays in the house, run all the errands. That's something. Yeah, there are opportunities that we can look into
beyond the traditional restaurant. And because nobody has the answer about what's going to happen next, are we going to see restaurants exactly the way they are? Are we going to have restaurants with a lot of social distancing, which changes the very nature of the restaurant? We've become people go to restaurants for that intimacy, for that interaction with the wait staff, the chef, the sommelier, and also to be very close to their friends and loved ones. Are we going to still see some of that? Will it be, so if this advanced level 3 goes ahead and we do have restaurants that are opening, how many restaurateurs are willing to open and at what risk, you know? So these are things I know we don't really have answers to, but that we need to keep circulating in dialogue and keep pushing each other to think about. You know, well, I have you here.
If I may, on that point, I mean, the restaurant where I work at, I think we all came together, came back to the restaurant this week, and our chef just came and sat us down, and I think it was just speaking to us about trying to keep the restaurant alive. And I think we have to be mindful of the fact that restaurant owners are small businesses. Most of them are run as small businesses, and this is their bread and butter. We're talking about years of investment in training and working as chefs in the industry, and people who are just passionate about food and passionate about what it is that they do. And we as a team of chefs are also passionate, students and scholars within the kitchen environment. And we're there to support our head chefs, our executive chefs in their endeavor. And I think people are fighting for their lives in the industry right now to keep it alive. And I don't think that this is the last that we'll hear of restaurants as they are. I think as we've seen throughout the lockdown period, we are resilient and we are adjusting to the challenges. And I think a lot of other industries are also facing the same risks. I mean, we're able to go to a mall and go shopping as well for our bare necessities. Every time we step out in those spaces, we're exposed to risk. So I don't think that restaurant culture will die down. I think it's ingrained within the fabric of our society. I think we'll just see dining out in perhaps a different way. Again, just being mindful of making sure that we're taking the necessary precautions. Yeah.
Yes, and of course, if we were able to procure a vaccine very soon, I mean, this could signal the end of the times that we've endured, and perhaps, you know, us also going back to enjoying some of the way in which restaurants operated. But, you know, one of the things that one of the many things coming out of these conversations, when we speak about reimagining, is that people have been inventive. People have been perhaps forced to be inventive out of necessity. And I, for one, am going to be very curious to see how some of these inventions play out going forward. And as we have our last handful of minutes, I would like to invite our panelists to address the class of 2020 in these unprecedented times. All of us are navigating this together, and we can only take a single step at a time. But out of words of encouragement that you would like to offer, we have 4 minutes. Maybe you could just take a minute each. Bongo, would you like to, in a minute, speak to the class of 2020?
Class of 2020, well, I'll call them, I had an opportunity to lecture second year students at a chef school in Pretoria, and actually Centurion. I'll address this to them. My second years, you don't know everything. Also, don't be afraid to ask. Be confident to make mistakes. It's not that bad. You are more powerful than you think you are. Just be confident. Just be confident. Everything will be fine. We are there to help you. We are there to guide you along the way. That's what I would impart them.
And Funi?
For me, I can just say stay positive, and then there's a reason for everything, and then don't lose hope.
Mm-hmm. Kabelo, would you like to say something to your fellow students?
Well, I'd just like to say that you should just stay positive and stay strong. We'll get through this. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And I think one could also draw a lot of inspiration from everything Sine said just prior to that, which actually inspired me to ask you this as well. I want to just then use the last few moments to read some of the things that have been said in the chat, if that's okay. One is from Sepil, who says, I have a small restaurant, Sepil's Kitchen, and we have one second year student from Silwood in the kitchen. As we are not busy as before Corona, we could spend more time to teach new things, but we cannot offer as intensive experience as we used to. If I were a student now and I could afford to, I would study and experiment. I could not spare enough time. I suppose she meant at that time. I'm wishing you all the best. Tendai says, class of 2020, everything is at your disposal. Use all your platforms to learn as much as you can. And then prior to that, Linda was just giving us an example of how her background. So thank you so much to everybody who has joined us on this discussion. You've opened up many things for us to ponder and think about, and us at SAPOC at the table, we're going to be taking some of these notes down, and we're going to be utilizing them in further discussions. So if you have ideas or topics that you would like to see addressed, we're always welcome and we always open it. You can email me at info@sapoctable.com. Thank you to everybody for joining us today, for giving us your time and your insight, and we wish the class of 2020 and everyone in the kitchens in our industry all the very best. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys.